Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, once again, depending on when you are taking this lesson. My name is Mr. Kanwar. I am a Director of Science for Outward, and today's lesson in our series of lessons is B5, Paper 2, Homeostasis and Response. We're looking at reproductive hormones. This is either for foundation, higher, or triple. So some of you have done the previous lesson, which was on water balance and nitrogen balance. That was a triple only lesson. So this is a continuation of the thermoregulation lesson, the homeostasis part. So this is lesson 8, paper 2, biology, B5, homeostasis and response. And today's title is reproductive hormones. And as I said, this is for everyone. So, and I apologise to triples because you already had these starter questions. However, the combined students haven't, and even so, it's good practice to do previous questions as it is. The questions that I've got for the starter will test your knowledge from the previous 3 or 4 lessons. So, really simple recap of some recall. So, question number 1. So you can jot these down, write them down on a sheet of paper, or jot them down in a Word document. What organ produces insulin and glucagon? Question 2. Does insulin raise or lower blood glucose concentration? Question 3. What is a risk factor for type 2 diabetes? Question 4. What is the master gland called? And question 5. What happens to the blood vessels during vasodilation? And I shall give you 1 minute to have a go at those questions. You don't need to write them out fully, just give me the answers. It's only a recap of previous learning. "30 seconds remaining. Ten. So time is up. Let's go through the answers. Question number 1, what organ produces insulin and glucagon? That would be the pancreas. Question 2, does insulin raise or lower blood glucose concentration? Well, let's think about it before we give our answer. When we eat, that's when insulin is released. And the only reason why insulin is released is because blood glucose concentration is high. That's what happens once you've eaten. So the role of insulin is actually to lower blood glucose concentration. And if we remember, it does this in 2 ways. Number 1, it moves the glucose from the bloodstream into the cells for respiration. That's number 1. Number 2, it converts glucose into glycogen, and that is stored in the liver. So those are the 2 things that insulin does. Question number 3, what is a risk factor for type 2 diabetes? Now let me be absolutely clear. What is a risk factor for type 2 diabetes? Not what is a risk of type 2 diabetes. Now, if some of you put heart attack and so forth, that is a risk factor of type 2 diabetes, but for type 2 diabetes means what can cause it, and that is obesity or lack of exercise and so on. So just be careful when it comes to questions such as that. Is it for that or is it of that in terms of the risk factor? Question 4, what is the master gland called? Remember that you find this in your brain. It is the pituitary gland. And question 5, what happens to blood vessels during vasodilation? Remember, the clue is in the question. Vasodilation, so it dilates, it gets larger. And the reason why it wants to get larger is because it can lose heat quicker by radiation. So it's basically a cooling mechanism. So that is vasodilation. Now those questions cover the previous topics. Let us go on to what we are learning about today. And what we are doing is, our challenge is to describe the changes which occur during puberty. Okay, and our aspire, explain how hormones are involved in human reproduction, particularly looking at the menstrual cycle. So that's generally what we'll be looking at. So, challenge, describe the changes which occur during puberty. That's what we're going to be looking at first. So what I want us to think about is what changes occur in puberty. Now, you probably know quite a fair bit about this, or hopefully you do, but I want us to separate them into three categories. So in your books, tables, or the sheet of paper that you're using, or even a whiteboard if you've got one, what I'd like you to do is to make a table, really just a rough one. Put three categories, category 1, 2, and 3. Category 1, changes that only happen within girls. Category 2, changes that only happen within boys. And category 3, changes that happen to both boys and girls during puberty. Now, I'm going to give you some time to think about this. I shall give you 2 minutes to have a think. Jot down as many points as you can, the changes that occur during puberty. For those of you unaware what puberty is when your body is changing from being a child to being an adult, and generally that occurs during the ages of 11 to 16, but obviously can extend to 18 to 21 and could even in some cases start below the age of 11. So that's the change that you're going through. They could be physical, they could be mental, they could be hormonal, it could be all sorts. So you have 2 minutes from now. Minute 30. A minute remaining. Thirty seconds. Okay, let us see what we have got. Now, there are loads of answers we could have got. These are some general points that we could have. So let's look at boys only first. So what happens to boys? The voice breaks. Okay, so that's because your voice box is growing and it becomes from rather childlike to obviously an adult. Hair grows on face and body. Again, this happens at different rates. It doesn't have to happen when you're 11, but it could happen when you're 13, or it could happen when you're 18. Everyone's very different, but hair starts to grow on face and body. The body becomes more muscular. So what you start seeing are more defined muscles that start growing, and also the testes start produce sperm cells. Okay, so that's what happens with boys only. Now with girls only, on the other side, the voice deepens ever so gradually. Okay, so not as much as the boys because there the voice breaks, but it deepens gradually. Girls' hips get wider. Okay, they start to develop breasts, and the ovaries start to release eggs. So a process called menstruation starts. Common name, basically start having periods. So that's what happens with girls only. And with both boys and girls, pubic hair grows. For those of you unaware what the term pubic hair means, it just means hair that grows in your pubic regions. So that would just be around the vagina or around the penis. Underarm hair grows, so that's under your armpits, and sexual organs grow and develop. So that's what happens with boys and girls. So if you've got those down, that's absolutely fine. If you've not, jot them down. You need to have just a general idea of what happens in puberty. It's not a question that comes up a lot, but it could be something that you need to describe in terms of they give you some information and they ask you what changes have occurred. So it might not be something directly they ask. They're not going to ask what happens to boys during puberty, but it might be that they've given you some information and then you have to infer it. Even so, even regardless of what it is you need for the exams, it is important to know that these changes occur. So, just a couple of notes we need to get down. Like I said before, puberty is a stage in life when a child's body develops into an adult's body. It takes a long time. Sometimes it can happen really quickly, and then it will slow down, and then it will have another burst, so to say, particularly if you think about height. So sometimes between the ages of 10 and 11, you grow quite a bit, and then all of a sudden you don't grow that much, and then again at 14 you grow again, you have a spurt, and puberty can be very much like that. The changes usually occur between the ages, as I said earlier, between 11 and 16. Here we've got 10 and 16. It could be earlier, it could be later. During puberty, reproductive hormones cause secondary sex characteristics to develop. So, and that is the release of a hormone called testosterone and a hormone called estrogen. Now, we need to make sure that we get these 2 points down in particular because these are questions that they could ask you. So point number 1, testosterone, where is it produced? It is produced by the testes. You find the testes in the scrotum, also known as the testicles. Absolutely, you cannot call testes anything else. It is a gland and they need to be called testes. Calling them scrotum, bag, balls, or any of that is not allowed. So any commonality that you give to them, it won't work. You need to call them testes because that's what the gland is. And it's the main male reproductive hormone and stimulates sperm production. So that's what testosterone does. Then there is estrogen, and that's produced by the ovaries. Easy way to remember, oestrogen from ovaries, and that is the main female reproductive hormone. Now at puberty, eggs begin to mature, and one is released approximately, but not exactly, every 28 days. This is called ovulation. Ovulation is the process of it being released. Now, I've said every 28 days. For many girls, when they first start, it is nowhere near 28 days. It could be as short as 14. It could be as long as 38. And those are numbers that I've just plucked out the air. It could be even shorter or could be even longer. There could be multiple ovulations within a month. And that's because your cycle has just started, and those cycles will, over time, sink to roughly around 28 days. It may never, and sometimes we need to take hormones or the pill to regulate those. So that's enough of me talking. What I want you to do is just to make sure, and I'll give you 30 seconds to do so. If you need longer, that's absolutely fine. Just pause the video. 30 seconds to get down what is testosterone, what is estrogen, where is it produced, and the role it has. Okay, like I said, if you've not had time to get that down, just pause the video, but we're going to move on. Just to make sure that we're on the right track, though, I just want to ask these 5 questions. So look through your notes, and this is why I do this is not because I think you remembered the answers. I don't do it because I think you remembered the answers. I want to make sure that what we've learned so far, you're able to, from your notes, answer these questions. So I've got 5 questions. I'll give you, from now, I'll give you 3 minutes. However, I'm going to read the 5 questions and I'd like you to answer them. Question number 1, when does puberty generally occur? So the ages. Question 2, where is testosterone produced? Question 3, what does testosterone stimulate the production of? Question 4, where is estrogen produced? And question 5, what effect does estrogen have on a female? So I'll give you 2 minutes to answer those questions. You do not need to write them out, you just need to write the answers. Minute remaining. Thirty seconds. Okay, so let's go through some of these answers. When does puberty generally occur? Between the ages of 10 to 16. Where is testosterone produced? It is produced in the testes. What does testosterone stimulate the production of? That would be sperm. Where is estrogen produced? That would be the ovaries. Well, what effect does estrogen have on a female? Is that the period occurs every 28 days. That's the menstrual cycle. And the egg is released, and that's called ovulation. Okay, so that's the effect of estrogen. So those were just some questions, just to make sure that we're on the right track. If you've not got any of those right, I suggest you write the question out with the answer, or you make sure that you go back through your notes and you've got these answers down. These are key questions that we need to make sure that we know before we can continue. So let's move on to something called the menstrual cycle, which occurs in females. Now, there's a complicated diagram in front of you with lots of numbers and a few words. Some words we know, some words we don't know. Now, there are lots of keywords here, words that we need to be aware of. So we've got brain in the middle, as you can see, with the number 1, followed by something called FSH. You've got number 2. So you can see, let's just make sure that we can follow the numbers. So here we go 1 to 2, and then we go 2 to 3 in some, and there's a process here. We then go from 3 to 4 when there's estrogen over here, and then from 4 we have also 5. So 4's there and 5 is there. So 2 effects estrogen has. 6 from from here, LH, back to number 7. Number 7 has this effect, but also 8 and 9 has an effect back onto there and back onto the brain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rub those out. What I would like you to do, and this is important that we do this absolutely correctly, is it is not necessary to draw exactly what is drawn here. So for this, you could put womb, yeah, or uterus. Okay, so we could put womb or uterus. My spelling's not that great there. Here, again, we've got ovary. Okay, so this cell is the ovary. Here, we've got pituitary gland, PG. And here, what you've got is it says there actually, corpus luteum, which is the wall, the lining of the womb. So they're those bits. What I want you to do is I actually want you to draw a similar diagram. Now, I put the words there because you don't need to draw it. However, what I'd like you to do, if you've not got it in front of you, which hopefully you have done, but it doesn't matter if you haven't, I'd like you to draw it because drawing it in this cycle allows us then to label each point. And what we're going to do is we're going to label each point. So I'm going to give you a bit of time. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Pause it if you need more. But what I want you to do is get that diagram down. I'm going to just scribble out my writing. So here we've got uterus, womb. Here we've got pituitary gland, but you can just put the picture, you can put just brain for the moment, and the corpus luteum there. So if you've got it, try and copy it down as I've got it. I appreciate that if this was a lesson that was being taught in front of you, the teacher would give you this diagram, but obviously it's a video lesson and we don't have those materials in front. So 2 minutes, get that diagram. If you can get that diagram down, then we will go through the menstrual cycle. Minute remaining. Thirty seconds. Okay, so what we've got is we've got a diagram. We've got a diagram of what hormones are involved in the menstrual cycle. Okay, that's there. And we're going to discuss this very diagram through certain points. So hopefully you've got the numbered points. If you haven't, make sure that you pause this video and you get this diagram down. So let us go through each of those points. So point number 1. What is happening? And this is generally regarded as the start of the cycle, but it's not necessarily the same. This happens on day 1, so to say. Okay, but this happens at the start of every cycle. FSH, also known as follicle stimulating hormone, is released by the pituitary gland in the brain. Okay, so that's stage number 1. FSH, also known as follicle stimulating hormone, is released by the pituitary gland in the brain. I'm going to read all of these, but I will give you time in the video to then get these down. Number 2, what happens is that FSH travels to the ovaries and causes an egg to start to mature. That's the job of FSH. Okay, so FSH travels to the ovaries and causes an egg to start to mature. Also, FSH stimulates the ovaries to produce estrogen. So it has 2 jobs. 1, it causes the egg to mature. That's actually number 2. And the second thing, which is number 3 on our list, is it stimulates the ovaries to produce estrogen. Now that estrogen has 2 things it does, and they are labelled number 4 and number 5. So number 4, estrogen causes the uterus lining to thicken. So the lining along the uterus thickens. And the second thing estrogen does is it travels back to the pituitary gland and inhibits, therefore slows down and stops the production of FSH. Now I'll go into why that is later. But for the moment, estrogen travels to the pituitary gland to inhibit, i.e. stop, the production of FSH. Now those are points 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. You need to get those down because you need to be able to definitely label them and also tell me where these are produced. So for example, FSH by the pituitary, estrogen by the ovaries, which we've already done estrogen, and then tell me what they do, and they do, each of them do 2 things. Okay, so I'll give you 2 minutes to jot that down. Minute 30. A minute. .30 seconds. So that's point 1 to 5. Let us go through points 6 to 9. So what does 6? Estrogen also stimulates the pituitary gland to produce LH. So that's a different hormone called luteinizing hormone. So estrogen stimulates the pituitary gland to produce LH. LH released from the pituitary gland causes ovulation. The egg is released from the ovary. So that's point 7. Okay, so LH released from the pituitary gland causes ovulation and the egg is released from the ovary. Point 8, progesterone, which is the 4th hormone. Okay, so we've gone through FSH, LH, estrogen, and this is now the 4th hormone, progesterone. It's released from the corpus luteum. That's basically the empty follicle the egg was released from, which maintains the uterus lining and stops the release of FSH. Now, it's important that FSH is stopped. And the reason why you want FSH stopped and why estrogen and progesterone do it is because you don't want more than one egg being matured at any time. The best outcome for any couple or for any woman is that they have one child. Of course, it's nice to have twins and so forth, but that's naturally what shouldn't occur, and that's what FSH stops from happening. And you also don't use all your eggs up at that time. After 14 days, the corpus luteum dies. Okay, so it just goes. So the progesterone stops being produced. If the egg is not fertilized, a period occurs and the cycle begins again. Okay, so that's after 14 days. The empty follicle the egg was released from, that completely disappears, so therefore no more progesterone is being produced. So those are our 4 last ones, step 6, 7, 8, and 9. Remember, they're not necessarily in order, that's just how the diagram puts them. So I'll give you another 2 minutes to get those down. One minute 30. Seconds. Right, okay, so that's what we've got for our 4 latter stages. Now, what I've got on this slide is I've got a summary table. Do like my summary tables because it makes it much easier. We can make sense. What we've got before is like a big flow diagram. However, these are the main points that we need to make sure that we know. So what we've got is we've got hormone, and we've got the 4 hormones involved in the menstrual cycle: FSH, estrogen, LH, and progesterone. Where they are produced, so pituitary, ovary, pituitary, ovary, and then the effects of each one. FSH, estrogen, progesterone all have 2 effects, whilst LH only has the singular effect that we need to know. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give you 3 minutes to get down this table, or to write it in sentence. It's up to you how you want to present it. I think this is probably the best way to present it so you can remember it. However, these are the facts we must remember. Okay, so 3 minutes, I'll start now. So these are the facts. While that's going on, I'll just talk a little bit more about what the style of exam question you could possibly get. They could range from tick boxes where you have to match the hormone to what it does, or it could be a 4 to 6 marker where you actually need to write in prose, so in sentences, in regards to the whole process itself, so the whole cycle itself. It may ask you to describe that cycle, or as I said before, it could be as simple as an AO1 recall tick box where you've got FSH, LH, and progesterone. Might ask you where it's produced and or the effect of. So you've just got over 2 minutes to get that down. If you do not have a chance to get that down, then do make sure you pause the video. A minute 30. .30 seconds. Okay, if you've not managed to get those down, just pause the video and then you should be able to get those down. Right, now there's a higher tier section, or there's a higher tier aspect to this topic. So those on combined foundation, you can definitely listen to this. You will never be asked a question in regards to these diagrams or explaining those. However, it's still useful to understand the whole process. So these are specifically for higher tier. And the question that I'm posing you, describe how the hormone levels change during the 28-day cycle. Explain why they do so. So how does it relate to their function? And what you can see is, you can see here hormone levels. Okay, so you've got green for estrogen, black for progesterone, orange for FSH, and blue for LH. These are nominal days, so you've got day 1 to day 28, and this is the lining of the womb, and it tells you, it shows you what's occurring. So effectively, they've kind of got 4 stages to this process. Stage 1, as it says, talks about the lining of the uterus breaking down. That's basically the period. Stage 2 is the uterus lining building up back. You can see that estrogen levels are rising, LH is rising, FSH kind of stays the same, and then there's suddenly a peak of FSH and LH. Stage 3 is when the developed egg is being released around day 14. Stage 4, the uterus lining is maintained just in case fertilization occurs. Remember, the word fertilization means when an egg and a sperm come together. And then obviously we then move to 28, which is effectively day 1. Remember, not every cycle is 28 days, so I do appreciate that. So what do you need to be able to do in the higher tier in particular? Basically, you need to talk about why certain levels increase at certain times, but you need to just relate it to the roles. Okay, so we know that FSH will increase when an egg wishes to mature or to get the egg maturing. We know that LH will go up when the egg needs to be released or causes the egg to be released. We know that estrogen levels need to go up to make sure that the uterus and the lining is able to thicken. We need progesterone levels to go up at certain points so it maintains the lining. This isn't any more knowledge. You don't need any more knowledge here than what we've already learned. What you need to be able to do is apply it to a graph such as this. It might not be like this at all, but there will be graphs that will be given to you. It's come up quite a few times in the exams where they'll give you these kind of graphs, individual ones for LH, FSH, estrogen, and progesterone, and they'll ask you why certain ones have gone up, why certain ones have gone down. But again, it just relates to the role and their function. So as long as you know those, you should be able to answer those. So that was just me going through this process. I'm not going to actually ask you that question because we've kind of gone through that. Now, what I want us to do, just to finish off, I'd like us to go through some exam questions. Not too many. So what we've got is, I've got a question 1, figure 3, shows the position of some of the glands which release hormones. Which label on figure 3 shows the position of the pituitary gland? And then part G, as it is, because I've cut this question, luteinizing hormone is a hormone produced by the pituitary gland. What is the function of LH? You only need 30 seconds to answer those two questions. So either A, B, C, or D for question 1, or controls blood glucose, controls the formation of sperm, controls the growth of muscles, or controls the release of an egg. So 30 seconds to answer those two. Okay, let's move on to the second part. Part H, how does LH travel from the pituitary gland to its target organ? So remember, what is LH? It is a hormone. That should kind of give you the answer. Then part I, figure 4 shows the relative levels of sex hormones of 3 young people over 30 days. One person is an 8-year-old, one person is an 18-year-old boy, and the other is an 18-year-old girl. So think about the processes that we've spoken before. Remember the start of this lesson when we spoke about puberty in particular. You're not being asked directly. So I was quite clear when I was talking about these sorts of questions. You don't get asked directly, but you will get asked indirectly about puberty. Which person do you think is the 18-year-old boy? What is it that you need to look out for? And give a reason as to why. So I'm going to give you, because I've spoken quite a bit, I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer those two questions. "30 seconds. Right, okay, let's go through some of the answers. Here we are, mark scheme. So the answer to question 1 was A, the pituitary gland was found in the brain. Question 2, or part G, what is the role of LH? It controls the release of an egg. Question 3, or part H, how does it travel from the pituitary gland to the target organ? It is a hormone, so therefore it travels in the blood. Okay, and then the final question, whether it was person A, B, or C, the person is C because it is the only person with testosterone. Okay, and the testosterone level was much higher. It couldn't have been the other two because of the graph doesn't show testosterone to be high, and you would not expect testosterone to be high in a female. However, you could have written the opposite. The estrogen or progesterone levels are low. Okay, so you could have put that down. Or the estrogen and progesterones do not rise and fall like the menstrual cycle, or there is no menstrual cycle. So either one of those are absolutely fine. Hopefully, I think you probably did manage to get at least 4 to 5 out of 5 on that. If you didn't, go back and make sure that you understand which bits you've got wrong. Okay, so that is the lesson in regards to human reproduction. We shall continue on this vein when we're talking about infertility and we're talking about how to prevent pregnancy. So those will be the next couple of lessons. Once again, thank you for joining me. This is B5, Homeostasis Response, Lesson 8 on human reproduction. Thank you very much and see you next time. Goodbye.